have to be intentional to achieve oneness and to pursue oneness. So we should always continually pursue that, even if we're at different stages in our growth. Gary Chapman says it best, couples either grow or regress. They're never standing still. And so basically, if you're not growing as an individual, and if you're not growing together as a couple, then you're regressing. You're not just standing still. That doesn't exist. And so we have to be intentional about that and just be aware of it.
Welcome to Renew and Transform, a podcast to renew and transform your mind and cultivate your leadership to live a life worthy of your calling. I'm your host, Mindset and Leadership Coach, Musa Mikkel. Let the renewal begin. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, I have an amazing guest with me to share his wisdom on relationships and marriage and communication. His name is Jackie Bledsoe. Jackie is the best-selling author of The 7 Rings of Marriage, which has helped over 115,000 married couples. And he's also an international speaker who helps men lead with love and live on purpose. You may know him through Happily Married Couples, the marriage brand he and his wife, Stefana, founded to help couples build a better connection and communication in their marriages. For the past 12 years, Jackie Bledsoe has been creating content that reaches and transforms the lives of people where it matters most to them, marriage and family. Now he's teaching Christian content creators this process so they can reach and transform the lives of their people. This episode's one you do not want to miss. If you're in a relationship, if you're in a marriage, and if you're even single and pursuing that, we talk about how to have success in relationships and marriage, the importance of communication, the key skills to learn how to have a healthy marriage and what that looks like. We talk about his book, The 7 Rings of Marriage, and what the stages of good marriage and a healthy marriage looks like. We talk about singlehood and what it looks like to be single and to pursue yourself and the growth-mindedness that is required to continue growing and evolving in yourself and in your relationship. We also talk about what it looks like when we're not doing that well in our relationships, when we're facing hardships, when they're maybe on the brink of divorce, or when we don't see a way it could be fixed or resolved, and how to bounce back from that. Let's get into the interview. Thank you so much, Jackie, for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for asking me to join, Musa.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I've been inspired by you and the work your wife do. And I had to reach out to connect with you and have you on the podcast because what you teach, what you help people with is the foundation of our personal lives. It's the foundation of our families. It's the foundation of our relationships and our society as a whole. And I see a lot of these issues come about in families with violence and criminal activities and divorces and just struggle in relationships and communication. And you do such a beautiful job teaching us about that. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about what you do and how you got inspired in helping people in their relationships.
Yeah, we accidentally walked into it, I guess I'd say. We were actually helping couples years ago, early in our marriage, and we didn't even realize it. We didn't even look at it like that. But when my wife and I first were married, we were the only friends of ours. We had one friend each that was married. And so everybody else was single. So we didn't have a lot of peers to learn from or go through this journey together. And then we happened to connect with some couples through a small group at church and formed our own little group where we just organically met once a month at a couple's house. And we were all around the same age of marriage, same age, just regular age as well. And so one couple would host once a month. And then we would, when you hosted, you not just hosted, but you also had to go study for the month and come up with a marriage enrichment activity or lesson that would help each of us grow in our marriages. And so we did that for a few years and just really grew closer as couples and didn't even know what that was preparing us for what we're doing in the future. Fast forward several years and I lost a job and I'm like, I'm not going back to corporate America. And we had a previous business. So I was like, I want to get back and put my entrepreneur hat back on. And so I noticed people were making money supporting their families online. So I was like, all right, this sounds cool. Let me try this out. Jumped in there, feet head first, and quickly failed. And so I didn't know what was going on, realized that everybody who had succeeded online and making money for their family had this thing, or making money, period, had this thing called a blog, which I didn't even know what a blog was at the time. So I was like, let me check this out. So I started my own blog. And the blog was really keeping my heels on job loss. Marriage just is going through changes and issues because of the lack of income. and now started a business that failed. So I'm like struggling as a husband, as a father, as a man. And so most of my blog, it became a personal development blog. Most of my blog content was really off lessons learned from interaction with my wife as a husband, and then interaction with my kids as a father. And so that's what I started to write a lot about. And people started to notice that. We started to connect. And it all started with the blog. And sooner, one door opened the next. I began writing for other sites, many of the marriage and family. I became this marriage guy, and everything took off from there.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Now, I want to ask because you have such an eloquent way of communicating the issues that people have in their marriages and their relationships. Was it always easy for you to communicate in your relationship? Or is that something you just developed over time and then started sharing that with others?
It was never easy, and it's still not easy. Still a work in progress. So I don't want to paint the picture that we are the perfect couple when it comes to communication and all that, but we learn and we grow. But over time, we continue to develop, but we still find holes in our game or chinks in our armor as well. And one of the things that helped us early on in our marriage, even during that season of being with the other couples and doing life together with other couples, is we always have had another couple who was not at the same age as us, but older, more years in marriage, wiser, more experienced, that we would go to for mentorship. So we've always had a mentor couple for our marriage at different seasons, not necessarily the same couple throughout the duration of our marriage, but different seasons we were able to connect with, become friends with, and just really sit at the feet of couples that have been there, done, that we could learn from. So we're always learning, whether in communication. So a lot of what we teach, and a lot of what we learn, and a lot of what we do in our marriage comes from other couples pouring into us, in addition to our own experiences and our own study. But there's a big foundation set on the couples that went before us, and we're willing to share what they've gone through with us.
That's great because I want to point that out because it's important, I think, for people to realize that it's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be easy, but that what you just described is the growth mindset that you and your wife both have that creates success. From what I can see and from what I've seen from couples that have great success, is that they're both learning. They're both continuously learning. And I think the biggest stress I've seen, and let me know if you've seen it too, is when one partner is not in that, not having that growth mindset, and that's not continuing to learn and reflect and analyze and get feedback from others. What have you seen as been like the most damaging things in relationships as a whole?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge right there that you just shared, is when one is has a growth mindset, the other doesn't. And there gets a little bit of division, a little bit of separation. And I think the biggest thing that you do is be intentional about it. And we do some work with family life. We do some weekend to remember events, which are basically retreats for married couples. And one of the foundational pieces that we teach on stage there is oneness. And but what we teach is, like most couples, it's easy to drift into, and you naturally drift into separation, or isolation is what we call it, where you're separated from your spouse, whether that's through one has a growth mindset, one doesn't, or whatever it may be. But you have to be intentional to achieve oneness and to pursue oneness. So we should always continually pursue that, even if we're at different stages in our growth. Gary Chapman says it best: couples either grow or regress. They're never standing still. And so basically, if you're not growing as an individual, and if you're not growing together as a couple, then you're regressing. You're not just standing still. That doesn't exist. And so we have to be intentional about that and just be aware of it. We can go down a laundry list of different challenges that you'll have in a marriage. And some people say that one's worse than others. But at the end of the day, we have to be intentionally pursuing oneness, pursuing growth as an individual and as a couple.
That's beautifully said. And I also want to point out that you attributed a lot of what you've learned to other people and having mentors and having counsel. And we see that in the Bible multiple times, to have counsel, to have support, to have a team. And I think this is a good way to think about it, but it's a team sport, success in anything we do, and especially in relationships. And I think a lot of times we struggle, and I know I struggle when I try to figure out all the things by myself, and I'm not looking for people who have success to help me or give me feedback or counsel me or mentor me. And I think that's what inspires me the most about you, because you're giving that platform to people to reach out, to connect with you and learn what works, to receive feedback. How important would you say it is in receiving feedback in marriage?
Yeah, it is vital. You said marriage is a team sport. The quote that I always say is marriage is not a solo sport. So we can't go out there by ourselves. And you've got to continually be seeking to grow and to learn from other people. And we did I don't know if it was a summit, I forgot what it was, but we interviewed several couples, about 20 some couples. And I asked them one particular question. Okay, if you had, and many of these couples were either in business or ministry together, but I think it applies across the board. And I asked, if you had to start over today, what would you do? And I don't know how many couples, but many of them said this. They, in some form or fashion, they said, I would find someone who's done what I want to do or who's gone where I want to go, and I would do what they've done. And so I think if you don't do that, yeah, can you succeed? Yes, you can. You're probably going to take longer. You're probably going to run into more roadblocks and stoppages and issues than you would if you're not. But learn from the mistakes and successes of other people. That shortens your learning curve. That shortens your journey. And that's, like you said, it's something that we see constantly modeled in the Bible, where someone is learning from someone else. And if we don't have that, you're going to struggle at best. You may quit before you get to the finish line, but when you've got those other people who are wiser, been there, then you've got that encouragement, you've got that accountability, that feedback. There's one of our marriage mentors, the husband was very direct and to me, and he would not be afraid to call me out about something right there in front of my wife, right there in front of his wife. And I had to receive that. And he said one of the things that he liked and why he continued to pour into us is because I liked how you were able to receive my direction, even when it was not easy to receive. And so that's the challenge. A lot of times we go to get coaching, we go to get mentoring, and it's great when they're saying what we want to hear. But when they push those buttons or when they challenge us in an area that we're not doing well, or maybe even something that we don't fully agree with, that's when the challenges come. And so he was basically like, you were humble enough to receive it. And I can remember it was hard and I didn't fully agree with it, but I'm going to be humble enough to listen and receive and see if I can learn and get better from this.
That's such a valuable trait because I think all great teachers are great students. So our ability to be a student and even how to communicate better, how you're showing up to other people is so valuable. And I love the fact that you can purchase a book like your book and get your best ideas and advice and feedback in a book, right? It's all years of experience in one book. So you don't have to make the same mistakes. You can learn from other people. You can learn from what they've learned. And that's just a powerful aspect of growth mindset and learning from other people's mistakes. If you had 10 years of marriage or 20 years of marriage or 50 years of marriage and you've made all these mistakes, why should I redo that to learn the same lesson if I could get your book and learn some of the valuable things? And I want to talk a little bit about that, the 7 rings of marriage. Could you go over a little bit about what is in that and how that can impact people's relationships as a whole?
Yeah. And right before I get into that, I want to tag on something that you just said. It's like we've been married for 10 years, you get my experience, but just think about it. We've been married for 22 years now to make sure I got it right. But what is in that book came from lessons that couples who have been married 30, 40 years, other couples. So if you take that collectively, you're getting probably a century's worth of marriage experience because of what others have poured into us. And now we're turning it important to somebody else. So it just is, it's like it compounds. But that's the beauty of it. And so the 7 rings of marriage specifically it's really our marriage journey. That book came out of basically, okay, what have we gone through in marriage? And I'll give, for the people that want to get a little practical or what this is like, the practicality of it. I was a writer at the time I wrote the book, freelance writer, but that was when the blogging stage. I was writing for so many different websites, so many different publications, publishing new content all the time. And I had a deadline due and I had to come up with another marriage article. And about 2 weeks prior to that, I heard this sermon from a pastor. It was not about marriage. It was about a completely different topic. And he said, we've heard about the 3 or 4 rings of marriage, right? And he went over and rattled off his 3 rings and jumped right back into a sermon, which was unrelated to marriage. And so that was like, boom, out of everything I heard in that sermon, is on the radio, I heard that. And so I at the time, I just put it in my little note app, Evernote. And I said, I'll come back to it. A couple of weeks later, I was like, man, let me look into this. And so Stefan and myself sat down one night because I had to write an article. And I was like, okay, let's take a look at these rings deeper and let's see how they apply to us. And so as we started doing, we just started mapping out the different stages or seasons that we've gone through in marriage. And we created the 7 rings of marriage from that. And at the time when we wrote it, it was really just our marriage journey. And okay, and it was like a chronological, you go through this first. And I don't know if you want me to go through each ring, I can do that for sure. But
Yeah,
what we
if you would.
did, yeah, perfect. So I'll rattle those off and you can dig deeper into them if you want to. But it was our journey. So first you start out with the engagement ring, which is obvious. And the engagement ring really is the foundation period. That's where you're setting the foundation that your marriage will be built on. And so for us, our foundation is rooted in a relationship with Christ, where we come together with shared goals and vision rooted in what does the Bible say about marriage. The second ring is the wedding ring. And that's where, in a real sense, you're putting a ring on it and you guys are saying, I do. That's when you're fully committed. Prior to that, you can get out of engagement size. You can say, okay, we don't want to go through with this. Maybe we're not the couple to do this. But the wedding ring is really about commitment, and not just a contractual commitment, but a covenant commitment where you are making a commitment that you have to renew on a regular basis. That God, we stand before you, say, for till death do us part, we're married. We will continue to honor that commitment. Next, after that, now you start living together. You start coming together in all aspects of your life, and you start to discover some things. So the discovering is the next ring, where you start learning stuff about your spouse that you didn't necessarily know. My wife and I talk about the representative is who you were engaged with. And once you get married, that representative doesn't always appear the same. It's like he or she did the job, and now it's okay, I'm gone. So, but you also, during the discovering, you learn not about your spouse only, but you learn about yourself. And that's where the real learning comes from. It's okay, there's some things about myself that now are being brought out because I'm in this relationship with a completely different person and we're trying to become one. And so we talk about not accidentally learning, but becoming lifelong learners. And that is something that carries on through the rest of your marriage. And after you start seeing stuff and learning stuff and experience life together, now you get to the part where it gets hard, and that's the persevering. And that is the ring right in the middle. It's the fourth ring. And so this is where couples make choices. They say, okay, I'm going to go left and get out of this thing, this marriage. I'm going to go right and stay in the marriage and do all I can. Or maybe they'll go left, stay in the marriage, but just resign to our marriage is never going to be any better than this. We're not going to try to work harder. So now couples make the choice. For those that say, yes, we're continuing to go forward. Now you've got broken hearts, broken feelings, broken pieces of your marriage. Comes the restoring, where now you got to forgive, you got to go show grace, you got to put these things back together. You only do it by the grace of God and through his help. And so now after you go through the restoring, now you're like, man, we've been through some stuff. Now we're prospering and our marriage is in a different place. It's not perfect, but now the issues that used to plague us early on in marriage don't plague us like they do now. Now that issue that lasted 2 days, 2 weeks, whatever it is, now it's a couple minutes, a couple hours maybe. Now we can resolve it pretty quickly. So now you're a different thing. So your perspective on all you've gone through in marriage and your spouse has changed. And then like everything else in life, like we've been talking about mentoring, after you get to that point, now you are turning around and you're helping other couples. You're mentoring other couples. You're sharing your insight, your experience, your lessons learned so that they can grow. And so that's the 7 rings overall, but we teach it differently now than when we first wrote it. We didn't realize at the time that, yes, it's go through each stage and you get here, but each stage, there are different skills because marriage is about skill set as well, like communication skills. But each stage, each ring, there are different skills that you want to develop and master. And you can find yourself back in persevering through some circumstances in your marriage. Now you're going back and revisiting those skills and making sure you're honing in on those skills. So it's really about skill development, but the 7 rings of marriage provide the path along the way.
Man, so beautiful, so beautiful. And if you haven't gotten it, get the book. I know it's valuable for everyone who's in a relationship and for those who are not in one, but looking to be married at some point. Just so much gold there. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jackie. And I'll link that in the notes for people to have easy access to it. And I want to ask your advice because, yes, we're talking about marriage and relationships, but before that, before the engagement, people are single. And a lot of them desire a healthy, beautiful marriage and not want to get divorced. I don't think anybody's looking forward to having struggle and divorce in their future. But what advice do you give the single person who's desiring a marriage and who's not in a relationship yet?
Yeah, we're ironically at that stage now as we have a 22-year-old daughter. We also have a 17-year-old son who, as I record this, we're preparing for him to go to prom tonight. And so then we have a 13-year-old son who is at that age where we're starting to change a little bit. We've had some conversations and we're trying to share what we know with our kids as they have dates and interests in other people and all that. But one of the things that Stefan and I were recently discussing is when you get married, you are 2 different people from 2 completely backgrounds, from 2 different experiences and upbringings. And let's be real, you're 2 broken people. And so now, like we talked about, what we speak, what our conferences, you're pursuing oneness. You are to become one. That is hard to do. And so one of the best pieces of advice that I can give right now is for themselves to get whole, is where you have to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. So you may have some things in the past that have plagued you throughout your life. That's going to go into marriage when you say, I do. So how do you address that even before that? So get yourself right, take care of yourself, your personal development, your wholeness, make sure that you have addressed whatever it is. And you're not going to uncover or address everything, but that's the path that, okay, I want to be right for this. I want to be the best spouse for whoever God has for me to marry. And if both of you are doing that, you give yourself a much greater chance of eliminating some of the challenges. You still face them, or overcoming some of them easier. And ultimately is staying married and fighting divorce. So I think that's one of the biggest things. Is we were literally, Stefan and I, just having a conversation. We got baggage that impacts our relationship. And we didn't realize this before. Now this is hindsight. Our experience, man, it's so much different had we taken care of that early. But now we're working through it in the midst of it. So single people, don't go out there searching for the one so much that you don't start focusing on yourself, your own self-care, your own wholeness, your own challenges that you face with. Get right yourself, and then you'll be better for marriage.
Beautiful. That's probably the best advice. I think we focus on the other person that we want, and it's focus on you because you're the one person you can control. Focus on being that one person that you want. Yep. And continue with that growth mindset. Like we talked about in the beginning, it's all about the growth mindset, discovering that baggage and reflecting and getting coaches and mentors and people to support you and help you, and read books and programs and consume the things that help you grow. Because I love the way you put it, the pursuit to oneness. It's such a beautiful way to say it, because it is a pursuit. Growth is a pursuit of knowledge, pursuit of wisdom, pursuit of faith and strength and connection and communication. Like it's a pursuit, and pursuits don't happen when you're stuck or stagnant and not moving forward. So I love the way you put it there. And I want to ask you now, because you have 22 years of experience, what does a healthy marriage look like now?
It is a marriage full of a lot of grace. No, yeah, a healthy marriage is one where, like I said, with the persevering and get to the restoring and the prospering, is where you still face challenges. But number one, you are fully committed to your spouse in the marriage and making it the best you possibly can. So that's the first thing. Is both of one of my mentors, he says when he counsels people, he always asks these first two questions: do you want to stay married? And they both say yes. And he said, are you willing to do anything possible to stay married? And if they say yes, he's able to help them. If they say no, then he can't help them. And so I think that commitment to basically, we're committed to one another, to growing together, to having the best possible marriage we can. That is the first foundation piece. I think that makes a happy marriage. But I also think that you have to have something greater than yourself, because we have so much power on our own. We have so much that we can do on our own. And for us, like I mentioned earlier, it's our relationship with Christ, our foundation in Christ. And with that said, we're constantly seeking, what is he saying to me that I need to do, change, or whatever in the marriage? And we're constantly seeking him in prayer. If you were to ask Stefana that question, she immediately would have said prayer. That's it. Prayer has helped us through so many different things when we weren't sure if we were going to make it. And when we had problems that we didn't know how we were going to overcome, whether they're between us or external or circumstantial, whatever it may be, that foundation and continual reliance on prayer has helped us through. You read the book, you'll see some of the crazy challenges that we've been through. It's helped us through so many different things. So that's, to me, is the foundation for it. Everything else will flow from that.
So beautiful. And I just want to ask, do you and your wife pray together? And is that a habit you guys had since the beginning of your marriage, or is that something that you cultivated over time?
We've cultivated it over time, but there's still times when there's seasons and we look like, man, we have not been consistently praying together or even for each other sometimes. So my regular routine, which anybody, we're human. So we have routines, we have habits, and sometimes we get into bad habits or out of routine, and it's hard to get back. But my morning routine I call it prepare. And it's just an acronym for the things that I go through in my morning. And part of that is prayer. One of those P's is prayer. And I have a prayer plan. And actually it's funny because I thought I had my journal, but I don't have it. Part of that prayer plan is I have a day of the week that I dedicate to. One day's for my wife, one day's for our kids, one day's for our parents and extended family. And so I try to pray one day where that's the focal prayer for each other. And then we do different things that we can pray, but um, our goal is to pray every day together. Our goal is to pray every day for one another. Do we do it? Not every day, but we know that's the foundation of what will help our marriage remain healthy and continue to grow. We don't want it to be stagnant because it can't be stagnant. We got to continue to grow together.
I love that. Goes back to your pursuit to oneness. It's a pursuit. It's not perfect. It's not perfection. It's a pursuit to make progress and just improve those daily habits. And I did also want to talk to you about the challenging aspects of relationships and marriage. And, what is it that you've seen? If you can narrow it down to one or a couple things, like what is the main reason relationships and marriages fail?
Yeah, we've done many surveys over the years, talked to many people. Most people will say there's the big things that you focus on: communication, money, trust, and quality time. And when we do our surveys, most of the couples come back to we're just not connecting or we're having a hard time communicating. I think one of the biggest challenges is our lack of communication. And it's not like we don't know how to talk, we don't have the skill of communication and also dealing with conflict. Excuse me. And so basically, it boils down to when you don't know how to communicate or you haven't developed that skill, now you got to talk about money. That's just going to blow up because money's already a tough subject. Now, maybe there's some trust or feeling some issues like that, or maybe we're not spending enough time together. But when you spend time, you don't know how to talk. So I truly believe that at the root of most of our problems, it's our inability or a lack or needing more skill development when it comes to communication. We have different communication styles. We have communication habits, bad and good, that we brought into marriage, maybe from our parents or just our upbringing. And so that all comes into one when we're trying to communicate, and it can be combustible. And so like I said a few minutes ago, communication is something that we still work on and still need to work on. So we're constantly trying to get better. And there's sometimes we fail bad and we almost immediately recognize it, but it is a skill to develop. So if you're thinking about, even go back to the pre-married couples or ones that aren't engaged, that don't have a significant other, work on your communication skill too in all your relationships. How do you handle conflict? When someone is challenging, how do you handle that? All those different things are going to come into play when you get married. And it's going to be heightened because there's going to be many more feelings attached to it.
I love that, man. And that's why I love what you and your wife do, because I do believe communication is the root of all the issues we face in relationships as a whole, and all violence, all hatred, all these things that we see day to day, the domestic violence, all those things are really at the root, deep communication issues, and people not understanding emotional intelligence and the communication skills that most people aren't taught. No, most people don't take courses. Obviously, our school system doesn't really talk about how to be the best communicator, how to have emotional intelligence, how to pray and connect with people, your significant other, how to develop yourself and reflect. So it's like the work you do is so important because it's just a void in a lot of people's life. And I feel like it's just reactive. Everyone's reactive to their emotion without consciously understanding them. And if you can't even understand them, there's no way for you to effectively communicate. So, Jackie, the work you do is so important. I thank you so much for doing that. I just want to put it out there. And to go into that a little bit more, because some people might be struggling right now, their marriage or their relationships on the brink of failure, and they don't see a future. They can't see the hope. They can't figure out how to resolve it. They may be on the brink of divorce. What do you tell somebody who's in that situation right now?
Yeah, first I say stay encouraged. Don't let go of the rope. We've been there. Just being real. We have friends who do what we do, and these friends have gone through divorce and remarried each other. We had a friend couple that we used to speak with, and they said that they had gone through divorce, and the attorney told the wife to provoke the husband so he hits you, so you can win the divorce settlement. And they were that far gone, and they came back together. So that's the first thing: is don't lose hope, hold on. And when we talk about in restoring after the persevering, one of the things that you want to revisit, and maybe you've never set it up, but you want to revisit that foundation. What was it that brought you together? And if what brought you together is not what will sustain you. Now we got to rebuild or touch up our foundation. So again, remember the engagement ring is that foundational piece. A foundation over time may start to deteriorate or have some issues, but you can rebuild that. You can help to strengthen that foundation, but you have to go back to those basics of learning, you know, how to love and respect one another, those basics of learning how to communicate, all those different things. You want to praying together. You want to revisit those things that the dating, the things that made you attracted to one another, that made you desire to spend your life with one another. Start there. And I also say, I don't know where you may be, but we mentioned mentors and coaches, but we're also big proponents of professional counseling. And we've been through professional marriage counseling, and we were just talking like we need to not get caught slipping. Basically, we're not immune. Even no matter what we do, we're not immune. So maybe we need to just be aware of it and be proactive about it. But don't let go of the rope. Don't lose hope. Start doing some of those basic things, and then get professional help if you need it. And if your spouse is not willing to get professional help right now, you get it. Again, going back to working on yourself. How can you be better? Because it really takes, yes, two are going to come together, but one person can change a marriage. So as you change your heart, as you change the way you respond and react to your spouse, that can win your spouse over. They can be like, there's something different about you, and I want to know what it is. Now their heart is open. Now they're ready to receive, and you guys are ready to work together.
I love that. I love that, shifting the focus from the issues to what brought you together, what you love about each other, the value that caused the relationship to happen in the first place rather than the problems. I think that's such a powerful perspective. And I want to ask you, because you mentioned it before, just the having the growth mindset, and it's still a pursuit. What do you do now to keep learning and keep cultivating yourself and your marriage?
Yeah. Yeah. One, I surround myself with, I'm in masterminds. I surround myself with iron sharpens iron, with other people who are not only going to, I can just learn from, but they're going to challenge me. They're going to hold me accountable, and they're going to bring ideas and perspectives that I may not have had. I'm a big reader. I like to read. I listen to more audiobooks now and podcasts than I do physical books, but I'm going back to physical books because I just miss the physical book. And the way I learn, there's less distractions. So if you read a book, there's less distractions. If you listen to a podcast, audiobook, your phone, whatever it may be, you're probably doing something else, and something else may distract you. But reading, being surrounded by other people, and one of my foundational pieces, this goes with reading, is reading my Bible. And in the seasons up and down, seasons where I'm really hardcore into reading and studying the Bible are some of the greatest growth seasons of my life. And honestly, a lot of my content will come out of those seasons as God starts to reveal things to me about me. And then then the teacher in me comes out. It's like, okay, how can I share this to help someone else? Because we're not created to be a vacuum where we're just sucking stuff in, but we're a conduit. We're a flow through. And so whatever he pours into us needs to be able to pour out into somebody else, because he didn't create it just for us.
Absolutely. And to back on that, it's proven that you retain more when you are consuming stuff with intention to share it or teach it to others. And you have that role, I'm sure, when you're reading books, that you're learning and you're like, how can I also teach people what I'm learning? And then that makes you retain more of it, because you're focused on it your focus on it's a little bit different than just someone who's just reading to read it and check a box that they read a book. I did want to ask too, since we brought up that, what are some of your top books for just life, for marriage, for faith, whatever it is?
Yeah. So one of the two early books that really profoundly outside of the Bible that really profoundly impacted me were The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and then Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Those were two books when I was young and not really knowing what directions, like fresh out of college. A friend introduced me to them, and my mind never went back. And the biggest thing that it did was to open my mind to be wanting to be a lifelong learner, to want to learn more and grow and pursue that growth mindset, like you said. Because I'll be honest, when I was in college and when I was in high school, I didn't spend a whole lot of time reading. I did what was mandatory and probably the bare minimum of that. So I'd say now I don't go to the library like I used to, because books and where you get information has changed. But I spent way more time in the library, probably from age 22 to 27 or maybe to 2030, than I ever did in my previous 20 some years of life. And I was a full-time student, 4-year degree, high school and all that. But now I was learning for a different reason. I wasn't learning to pass a test, to get past the grade, get to the next level, whatever it was. I was learning to grow. But those two books are two foundational pieces that opened my mind to it, because it just, man, there's different thinking out there that I had never been exposed to. And there's been more books since then that I've read and that impacted me. But I love watching documentaries. I love reading autobiographies and biographies. I love the stories of people who have succeeded in some area or another, because they share the things that you don't see, the failures, the mistakes, the lessons learned, the challenges, the brink of divorce, the brink of failure, bankruptcy. So those are the books now that I really enjoy. But I'm an author, and because I'm an author and because I got a platform, so many people send me books to read and review, and I don't get a chance. The book list is long. And so I try to narrow that down, and I put a mandate on myself that I am not buying another new book until I read the books that I've wanted to read on my current bookshelf. And so there's a long list of those, but a lot of stuff is poured into me.
That's funny, man. And I think too, I resonate with that, because Rich Dad, Poor Dad was like the first book I actually read cover to cover. And
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to say it, because I think I was 20 or something when I read it.
Yeah.
So like you, reading bare minimum, I believed I didn't have the attention span to like fully read a book. But once I read that book, that kind of unlocked the mind. I was like, wow, I really don't know. And I need to just continue learning and read as much as I possibly can. And 7 Habits too, that one of my favorite books ever. I still try to review that book every year. It's so full of rich advice and great communication skills. And like you too, man, I got like hundreds of books on my list, but I don't go through them. I just buy new books, and it's just like a never ending thing. But I love it. I've become obsessed with the books and just learning as much as I can. And for you, I know we're wrapping up here because we're running out of time, but if someone wants to work with you, connect with you, or what else do you have to offer for people who are looking to get some more advice, some more guidance, some more mentorship from you and your wife?
Yeah. So if you need help in your marriage relationship, go to happilymarriedcouples.com. Yeah, that's happilymarriedcouples.com. And to start, we've got a free quiz that will assess your marriage, take you through like, where are you right now in your marriage? And then it'll give you a personalized action plan of what you need to do the next step. So start there. That quiz is free. If you just want to connect with me, we're on social as well with Happily Married Couples, but I'm most active on my own social media platforms. And that's just at Jackie Bledsoe Jr. So at Jackie Bledsoe Jr. Instagram is the number one that I'm on. That's the best place to find and connect with me there. Love to connect.
Awesome. I have those linked in the show notes. So just check it out. Follow Jackie, get his book, connect with his wife, Stefana, and just keep growing. Jackie, I always tell people that the greatest gift they could give, the most valuable thing they could give, is their time. And you giving me your time today. So I'm super grateful. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom and yourself and your gift and your skills with the world. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Appreciate it. Well, hopefully have you soon, man, because there's so much more I want to dive deep in, but I know we're running out of time. So hopefully if you're available in the future for a part 2, I'd love to have you again. And just thank you so much. Many blessings to you and your wife. God bless you for all the things you put out in the world. It's such a positive message.
Awesome. It is a pleasure. And I'd love to do it. We can do a part 2.
Thank you for tuning in. Be a light and share this with someone you love and care about. And please subscribe and leave a review so we can reach more people. And remember, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will.